There are moments in life when we feel the sting of rejection so deeply that it shakes our faith. A job opportunity we were certain was meant for us slips away. A relationship we poured our heart into suddenly crumbles. A dream we worked tirelessly for falls apart right before our eyes. In those moments, it's easy to feel abandoned, forgotten, or even punished. But what if that closed door wasn't a sign of rejection, but a divine act of protection? What if what we see as loss is actually God's way of steering us away from something that was never meant to be ours in the first place? Many times we get so attached to our own plans that we fail to see the dangers ahead. We convince ourselves that a certain path is the right one, that a particular person is the answer to our prayers, that this opportunity is exactly what we need. But God sees what we cannot. He knows what lies beyond that door we so desperately want to walk through. He knows the pain, the struggles, and the setbacks that may come if we force our way through it, and so, in His wisdom and love, He closes it. Not to hurt us, but to keep us from hurting ourselves. Think about how often we look back on our lives and say, "Thank God that didn't work out. At the time it felt like the end of the world." But now, from a distance, we can see the bigger picture. We see that the job we didn't get led us to something even better, that the relationship that fell apart saved us from years of pain, that the rejection we faced was actually the redirection we needed. God was protecting us all along, even when we couldn't understand it. But when a door closes, our first reaction is often resistance. We try to push it back open. We pray harder, work harder, convince ourselves that if we just hold on a little longer, things will turn around. But what we don't realize is that in clinging to something God has already shut, we are delaying the blessings He has waiting for us elsewhere. Sometimes the very thing we are fighting so hard to keep is the thing God is asking us to release. And until we let go, we will never be free to walk through the new door He is preparing. One of the most difficult lessons to learn is that protection doesn't always feel like protection in the moment. It can feel like loss, it can feel like failure, it can even feel like betrayal. But God's ways are higher than our ways. He is not just concerned with our temporary happiness, He is shaping our eternal purpose. He is molding us, refining us, strengthening us through the very things we wish we could avoid. And if He allowed that door to close, it is because He has already seen what is on the other side. Trusting that God's closed doors are His protection requires faith. It requires surrender. It requires the ability to say, "Lord, I don't understand why this is happening, but I trust that You do." It means shifting our perspective from loss to guidance, from disappointment to divine intervention. When we stop seeing closed doors as rejection and start seeing them as God's way of leading us to something better, everything changes. We no longer live in fear of what we might lose. Instead, we walk in confidence, knowing that whatever is taken away was never meant to harm us. It was meant to prepare us. When something we cherish is taken away, it's natural to feel a sense of loss, disappointment, or even anger. We invest so much time, energy, and emotion into certain things, believing they are essential to our happiness and success. And when they slip through our fingers, it can feel as though a part of us is being torn away. But what if the very thing we're grieving over was never meant to be ours in the first place? What if what we lose now is nothing compared to what God has in store for us? There are moments in life when we cling so tightly to something because we believe it defines us, a job that gave us a sense of purpose, a relationship that made us feel whole, a dream that seemed like the key to our future. But when God removes these things, it's not because He wants to leave us empty, it's because He knows they are not enough. He knows they are not His best for us, and He loves us too much to let us settle for less than what He has planned. When we lose something, we often see it as an end. We focus on the pain, the uncertainty, the unanswered questions. But God sees beyond the moment. He sees what we cannot. He sees the doors that will open, the opportunities that will arise, the blessings that are waiting just beyond our current understanding. The things we mourn today may be the very things that were holding us back from stepping into something greater. Think about the times in life when you thought you lost everything, only to later realize that it was a setup for something better. That job rejection that crushed your spirit led you to a career you never imagined. That relationship that ended left room for a love that was truly meant for you. That failed plan redirected you to something that aligned with your purpose. In the moment, it felt like devastation. But looking back, you see the hand of God working, moving, and guiding you towards something greater than you could have ever planned for yourself. God doesn't just take things away, He replaces them with something better. But the challenge is that we often can't see what's coming. We get so caught up in what we've lost that we fail to recognize the blessing that is on its way. We pray for God's best, but when He removes something from our lives, we resist. We try to hold on. We question His plan. But faith means trusting that what He has in store far exceeds what we think we need. God's ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. He doesn't operate on our timeline or according to our limited perspective. What seems like a loss to us is often a gain in His plan. What feels like failure is actually preparation. What appears to be rejection is simply redirection. When we surrender to this truth, we no longer fear loss because we understand that with God, every loss is simply a transition to something greater. The key is to shift our perspective. Instead of asking why something was taken away, we must learn to ask what God is preparing in its place. Instead of dwelling on what we no longer have, we must focus on what He is bringing into our lives. Because when God closes a door, He never leaves us standing in the hallway forever. He is always preparing a new path, a new opportunity, a new blessing that far surpasses anything we could have lost. And if we trust Him, we will soon realize that what we thought was everything was actually nothing compared to what He had planned all along. There are moments in life when nothing seems to make sense. A door closes, an opportunity disappears, a relationship ends, and we are left standing in the middle of uncertainty, questioning everything. In these moments, fear creeps in, doubt takes hold, and the voices in our minds tell us that maybe we weren't good enough, maybe we didn't try hard enough, maybe we should have done something differently. But faith is not about understanding every detail of God's plan. It's about trusting Him, even when nothing seems to be going the way we expected. Faith is believing in the unseen, holding on to the promise that God is working even when there is no evidence in front of us. It's easy to have faith when everything is going right, when doors are opening, when life feels full of possibilities. But the true test of faith is in the waiting, in the silence, in the moments when all we have are questions with no answers. That's when faith is refined, when it becomes more than just a word. It becomes the foundation we stand on. God never promised that life would be easy. He never said that we would understand every twist and turn along the way. What He did promise is that He would be with us, guiding us, strengthening us, and leading us toward His perfect plan. When we insist on knowing all the details before we trust Him, we are not operating in faith, we are operating in fear. And fear will always try to convince us that if we don't have control, then everything is falling apart. But faith is the opposite of control. Faith is surrender. It's saying, God, I don't know where this road is leading, but I trust that You do. So often we want God to reveal the entire journey before we take the first step. We pray for clarity, for signs, for confirmation, but God is asking for trust. He is asking us to take that first step without seeing the whole picture, to walk by faith and not by sight. Because faith is not about guarantees, it's about obedience. It's about moving forward even when we don't feel ready, even when fear is whispering that we should turn back. When a door closes, we immediately start looking for explanations. We ask why, we try to figure out what went wrong, but sometimes God doesn't give us answers right away because He is asking us to trust Him beyond our understanding. He knows what we don't. He sees the dangers, the detours, the things that would harm us if we walk through that door. And because He loves us, He blocks the path we were never meant to take, not to frustrate us, but to protect us, not to punish us, but to prepare us. There will be times when faith feels like walking in the dark, when every step forward is taken with uncertainty. But faith is not about seeing the destination. It's about believing that God is leading us to something greater than we can imagine. The question is not whether God has a plan. The question is whether we will trust Him enough to follow it, even when we don't understand. Because real faith is not about having all the answers. It's about trusting the one who does. There are moments in life when everything we planned for, everything we worked toward, suddenly crumbles before our eyes. The job we thought was our future is gone. The relationship we invested in falls apart. The opportunity we believed was meant for us disappears. In those moments, it's easy to feel lost, as if we've been pushed off course, wandering with no direction. But what if the setback wasn't a mistake? What if the closed door wasn't the end, but the beginning of something greater? So often we assume that a closed door means failure. We tell ourselves that if we had been better, worked harder, done more, maybe things would have turned out differently. But God does not allow doors to close in our lives to punish us. He allows it to redirect us towards something bigger than what we originally planned. The problem is, we don't always see it right away. We get stuck in disappointment, unable to recognize that the very thing we lost may have been the thing holding us back from stepping into our true calling. Think about the times in your life when something didn't go the way you wanted, only to later realize it was for the best. That job rejection led you to a position that changed your life. That failed relationship saved you from years of heartbreak. That disappointment became the very thing that pushed you to discover a new passion, a new purpose, a new version of yourself you never would have found otherwise. What seemed like an ending was really a beginning. What felt like rejection was really redirection. God has a way of using closed doors to move us into places we never would have gone on our own. Sometimes we get so comfortable where we are that we would never leave unless we were forced to. We pray for blessings, for growth, for new opportunities, but when God starts removing things from our lives, we panic. We forget that in order to step into something new, we often have to leave something behind. It is in these moments that our faith is tested, not when everything is going smoothly, but when we are forced to trust that God is leading us somewhere greater, even when we don't understand how. Every person who has ever walked in their true purpose has faced moments of uncertainty, moments when doors shut unexpectedly, moments when they questioned everything. But those who step into their calling are the ones who refuse to let a closed door stop them. They don't allow disappointment to define them. Instead, they choose to believe that if God allowed something to be taken away, He is preparing something even greater in return. They understand that every setback is a setup for something more. When we hold on to something that God is trying to remove, we delay our own growth. We spend so much time mourning what was lost that we fail to see what is ahead. But when we learn to trust that every closed door is part of a greater plan, we no longer live in fear of loss. We no longer question why things didn't work out the way we wanted. Instead, we move forward in faith, knowing that our calling is not behind us, it is ahead. And the only way to reach it is to stop looking back at what was and start walking toward what is to come. There is nothing more frustrating than waiting. We live in a world that teaches us to expect instant results, immediate answers, and quick solutions. But God does not work according to our timeline. His timing is not bound by human schedules, deadlines, or expectations. When we pray for something, we often want the answer right away. We want to see doors open immediately. Opportunities appear without delay, and every detail of our future fall into place according to our plan. But God's timing is perfect, and that means sometimes He makes us wait. Waiting can feel like silence, like a season of nothingness. We question whether God hears us, whether He sees us, whether He is working at all. We compare our journey to others, wondering why they seem to be moving forward while we feel stuck. But what we fail to realize is that God is not just concerned with the destination. He is shaping us in the process. The waiting season is never wasted. It is a time of preparation, a time of refining, a time when God strengthens our faith and develops in us the character we will need for the blessings He has in store. So often, we think we are ready for the things we are asking for. We believe we can handle the responsibility, the opportunity, the blessing. But God sees what we cannot. He knows the weight of what we are praying for, And He will not give us something that we are not prepared to carry. A blessing given too soon can feel like a burden. A door opened prematurely can lead to struggles we were never meant to face. That is why God's timing is always perfect, not just for our desires, but for our ability to handle what He is preparing. There are moments when we think God's delays mean His denial, but that is not true. Just because something is taking longer than expected does not mean it is not coming. God may be orchestrating details behind the scenes, aligning the right people, the right opportunities, and the right circumstances to ensure that when He does open the door, everything falls into place in a way that we never could have imagined. What seems like a delay to us is often divine alignment. The challenge is that during the waiting season, we can grow weary. We can start to lose faith. We can be tempted to take matters into our own hands, to force something to happen on our own terms. But when we step outside of God's timing, we step outside of His perfect will, we settle for something less than what He intended for us. The best things in life, the things that truly last, are always worth the wait. The problem is not that God is moving too slowly. The problem is that we often want things before they are fully prepared. Every season of waiting serves a purpose. It is in the waiting that we learn patience. It is in the waiting that our faith is strengthened. It is in the waiting that we develop the endurance to carry the blessings God has for us. When we trust His timing, we stop worrying about how long it is taking and start believing that He is working in ways we cannot yet see. Because the moment will come, the door will open, the opportunity will appear, the answer will be revealed, and when it does, we will understand why we had to wait. We will see that His plan was never delayed, it was always right on time. Sometimes when God closes a door, it is because He is protecting us from something we cannot see. We may believe that a certain opportunity, relationship, or path is what we need, but God, in His infinite wisdom, knows what lies ahead. He sees the dangers, the struggles, the pain that would come if we walked through that door, and because He loves us, He blocks it, even when we don't understand why. It is in these moments that we often wrestle with doubt. We question why things didn't work out, why something we wanted so badly slipped through our fingers. We may feel rejected, forgotten, or even betrayed by God. But the reality is, what feels like rejection is often His protection. What seems like a loss is actually His way of redirecting us away from harm. He is not withholding something good from us. He is leading us towards something better. Think about the times in your life when you wanted something so desperately, only to realize later that it was never meant for you. Maybe it was a job you thought would bring fulfillment, but if you had gotten it, you would have been miserable. Maybe it was a relationship you fought to keep, but looking back, you see that it would have only brought heartache. Maybe it was a dream you chased, only to discover that God had something entirely different planned for you, something that brought more joy, more purpose, and more peace than you ever imagined. We don't always see the full picture in the moment. We see through a limited perspective driven by our desires, our emotions, and our plans. But God sees beyond today. He sees what will shape us, what will strengthen us, and what will ultimately fulfill the purpose He has for our lives. And sometimes that means shutting a door we were ready to walk through, not because He wants to leave us lost or confused, but because He is guiding us towards something that aligns with His perfect plan. When we face disappointment, we have two choices. We can resist trying to force something to happen on our own, or we can surrender and trust that God is leading us towards something greater. The struggle comes when we hold on to something that God is trying to remove. We try to reopen doors He has already closed, believing that if we just push a little harder, we can make it work. But every time we do, we step further away from what He has in store for us. God's protection is not always obvious in the moment. Sometimes it comes disguised as loss, as disappointment, as unanswered prayers. But if we trust Him, we will come to see that the very things we thought were setbacks were actually His way of shielding us from something that was never meant for us. He is always working behind the scenes, arranging things in ways we cannot yet comprehend. There will be times when we don't get the explanation we want. We may never fully understand why certain doors had to close. But if we believe in God's goodness, if we trust His love for us, then we can rest in the truth that He is always protecting us, always leading us, and always working for our good. What feels like rejection today may be the very thing that sets us up for the greatest blessing of our lives.